Thank you, Emma. Okay, now for the main event. Today we welcome Yoon Lee from the Bay Area. He is the Senior Vice President and Head of Content and Services and Head of the Product Innovation Team at Samsung Electronics America. As head of the Product Innovation Team, which I'm going to now call PIT, Yoon is responsible for overseeing the creation of consumer insight-based innovative concepts for Samsung Electronics strategic midterm products across all product categories. Yoon also oversees the content and services teams that create SW products for our devices, which include contents and services in VR, Samsung Kids, Family Hub Refrigerator, and 4 other emerging platforms. I'm going to drop the card. Yoon has over 20 years of product design and development experience in most all areas of new product development verticals, from product strategy, design research, ideation, user experience, and concept development to hands-on engineering and product cycle management. He has worked on design and innovation topics for various industries, including automotive, aerospace, consumer electronics, retail, industrial equipment, and telecom services.
As you've heard, Yoon has a lot of experience in product development, leading product development teams, and previous to his current position, he was Vice President of Insight, Concept, and Portfolio at Samsung Electronics in Korea, where he led Samsung home appliance midterm products as well as their portfolio development. He spent 7 years as a product development and innovation consultant for some major management consulting companies, and also spent several years doing robotic product design as well. Yoon has publications in many professional journals and has spoken at several global design and innovation conferences as an invited guest speaker. Perhaps most importantly, something we can all relate to is that Yoon is a proud 2-time alumnus of the University of Michigan College of Engineering. And so please join us in welcoming Yoon Lee back to Ann Arbor. Thank you.
Thank you.
I got this too. Hello, everyone. How many of you guys are graduate students? Okay, good, not a whole lot. How many of you guys are seniors? Okay, junior? Okay, so majority of you guys are juniors, about sophomore. Any freshmen? Wow, ambitious. Better than myself. Can you guys see that well? Or is it a little too fuzzy? I think it's a little too fuzzy. Can you dim the light a little bit? All right. So I graduated from the mechanical engineering department in '89 with my bachelor's, and then '91 with my master's. And I worked right after that, I worked for Fanuc Robotics in Auburn Hills because, I drink oil. So I was a robotics engineer in the automotive sector for about 5 years. Then I moved out to California, got my PhD at Cal. Then I joined Accenture from 2000 to 2006. Then another boutique consulting firm called PRTM. And when I was at Accenture, Samsung Electronics was my client. And I was the project lead for putting product development process that geared towards extracting consumer insights as opposed to extracting competitors' products. So what happened in 2004, 5-ish area, Samsung became the #1 electronics manufacturer. So we really literally didn't have any products to copy from. The only thing that we can copy from was the market trends and the consumer trends. So I got pulled in to create that process and capabilities, and I got sucked into Samsung Electronics, which was fun, and I'm still here. So 12 years later, I'm still here. So, whoa, what happened here? Can you see that? So that's my first ever creation to the world, my contribution to the world, which is a robot painting robot for the side of the car called P300 Reciprocator. That was my first ever. which painted this car. And I'm sorry for the picture quality. It's called Nissan Quest, I think it's 1996. So I was determined to buy that car and literally like etch my name on the side and just kind of keep it forever as my family treasure, but I couldn't because it was so too damn ugly. So instead of buying the car, I just kept the brochure. Let me talk about where I'm working, which is Samsung Electronics America. Samsung Electronics America is part of Samsung Electronics Worldwide. Samsung Electronics Worldwide is about $200 billion company. I think we did about $250 billion this year. Samsung Electronics America, which sells finished goods like your phones and TVs and refrigerators, we do about a little over $30 billion in business. So just to kind of put that into perspective, if we are an independent company, we're about the size of Facebook, slightly above Facebook. So we're about like 97-ish, I think. So Google's about 90 billion. Amazon is about 136 billion in terms of revenue, and so on. So 2016, we don't have the 2017 data yet, but 2017, we shipped about 40 million phones just in the US. This is all US alone. About 10 million TVs and 1.5 million refrigerators. So to put that into perspective, anyone's been to China or anyone from China or been to China? Okay, good. Anyone been to Korea or any Koreans here? Okay, so national consumption of soju, which is Korean spirit, is about 3 billion bottles. And all those 3 billion bottles would fit into all the refrigerators we sold in 2016. Okay? If we lay flat our TVs, it'll actually it'll cover Great Wall of China if you lay down our TVs flat. We have about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 kind of bigger offices. So the one in New Jersey and New York, they're sales and marketing. And then we have a fabrication for semiconductor in Austin, Texas. We have a mobile business unit in Richardson, Texas. And then I belong to Mountain View campus, where we have R&D and innovation. San Jose also has Open Innovation Center, but they're primarily focused on semiconductor instead of finished goods. We have a design center in San Francisco and an e-commerce office up in Washington. We have about 250 PhDs. This is kind of our campus in Mountain View. And we collaborate with, and I'm sorry for omitting University of Michigan. I've learned how much we're actually collaborating with University of Michigan. So that needs to be updated. But we're collaborating with the local universities and, of course, U of M. In the areas of, can you see this? I can't. Can you? Can you see it? Okay. It's kind of. So all the usual suspects: AI, machine learning, e-commerce, next generation connectivity, payment. Those are all in our fields. Let me talk about my division, which is Product Innovation Team. It was established in 2006. It's located in Silicon Valley. The reason why we located ourselves in Silicon Valley is to leverage the open innovation network in the Valley and the startup community there. So we work on projects that spans across all of our product lines, from phones to refrigerators. And my organization is a midterm innovation organization, and the definition of midterm is the phone that I'm carrying is S8. We will be launching S9 this February in Barcelona. S10 is in the drawing board. We work on S11. So that's midterm. So next generation. So 2 cycles ahead. So you know what's really interesting is that I get confused with the year. So oftentimes when I write like a check, I don't write checks anymore, but when I sign, I forget what year it is because we're working right now for year 2020 products or 2020 products. So oftentimes I would write 2020 because that's so engraved in my brain, and I make that mistake all the time. So what's different? Who are we? And as like to my earlier comment, we're very focused in understanding the human insight first, which is customer insight. And the reason why I put it customer is we also study the business insight as well for B2B products. So consumer, B2C, B2B, so largely we call it customer. So we try to understand the social impact, the human impact, and customer impact to the kind of value, the solution that we want to create. And then that drives the design, that drives technology, that drives user experience. So what does that really mean? You know, what's a customer insight? What's a human insight? So let me get a little bit deeper into customer insight. All the previous slides were kind of PR-ish, you know, basically like hand-waving. This is kind of the meat from here, right? So before I get into customer insight or consumer insight, we first have to understand this concept of functional product and emotional product. So functional product, before I get into functional product, emotional product, let me lead you through an example. So let's say someone gave you these flowers, right? Maybe 2 or 3 stems of flowers. And let's suppose that you wanted that to last about a week. And if possible, you want to see the entirety of the flower, right? So I'm giving that to someone who could, you know, help me get to that solution. And the person who's, what the hell is this? Okay. The person who's requesting that happens to be a female professional homeowner known as Henry. You guys know the term Henry? You don't know? High earning, not rich yet. So, you know, like the late 20s and the early 30s, you know, they're professionals. This is kind of widely used in our space. It's called Henry. High earning, but not rich yet, right? So, so that's a task, right? So what would an artist do? So let's say that I gave this task to an artist. Artist is highly what? Emotional or functional? Emotional, right? So artist would give a solution like this. Beautiful piece of vase, completely useless, right? Because it doesn't, contain a single drop of water. I mean, it shows the stem and everything, it's beautiful, but functionally, it's completely useless. So then, what would an engineer do? How many engineers in this room? Most all of them. What would you guys do? You guys would probably do something like this. Completely functional, 100% reusable, you can see everything, contains water, but would you like to have that in your home, right? Probably not. Let me go to another example. So these are the top 6 requirements when buying a car. First, and this is kind of all published and researched, safety, fuel economy, reliability, convenience feature, comfort, and capacity. So when people walk into the dealership, they look for those solutions, you know, those 6. This is kind of bothering me, so I'm going to pick up it, put it on the. So, do you agree with this kind of functional requirements? Would you kind of consider that as your buying decision? Right? Okay, so let's assume that I'm going to give you guys about $25,000, okay? You can only buy one car, though. One car, right? And you have the choice between, and they're about the equal in price, okay? So you have the choice between the left and the right. How many would you get the car on the left? This is a 87 vintage Porsche in pristine condition. How many would you buy the right? Okay, right. So I see a little more on the left than the right, which means that when human makes a decision, it's mostly emotional at the end. No matter how functional you dissect the problem, at the end, it becomes an emotional decision, right? Yet, how do we understand that emotional side of the equation is vastly kind of a mystery. So my organization has more of a systemic approach of understanding not just the functional, but both emotional and functional aspects in terms of creating value proposition. So I'm going to go back to the vase case, right? What would you do in an ideal situation? I think you'd probably do something like this, right? Which is nice to look at. It satisfies all the requirements. You can see the stem and everything, and at the same time, it's very cleverly functional. You can, pour in the water in a very nice way. So that's probably what you want, right? So basically balancing the functional and the emotional value is called design. Artist, highly emotional. Engineering, highly functional. But if you are a designer, and I encourage every engineer to think like a designer, is actually giving a solution that's based on human intention, which is both functional and emotional. Typical examples of highly, highly functional products, like toilet paper. How emotional do you get over a toilet paper? Something like diapers, right? So there's different tactics for marketing these products versus different tactics for something like this. This is a typical emotional goods. I mean, literally, there's really no functional purpose other than make you feel good when you look at them, right? Functionally, it's terrible because it's occupying a space, right? Typical design goods, design products, right? Automobile is actually, in my mind, pinnacle of functional and emotional product because it's so complex from an engineering standpoint, yet it has so many elements of emotional things. When people decide, it's very important to balance those two. So emotional can be summarized as want. What do you want? Usually that's an emotional thing. And something that you need would be the functional area. But even within the emotional area, there's an irrational want and a rational want. So irrational want is like the brand, the aesthetics. You get blindly, you fall in love with brand. And you just like something that's beautiful. There's not a whole lot of rational reasons behind that. Rational emotional side is actually the promise of new value delivered. So what I mean by that is when I say, I'm going to give you a small device that attaches to your glass, and it's going to give first shooter's perspective of capturing all this video. That's a great value. Did I show you the exact solution? Not yet, but you're buying into my promise, right? So that's actually emotional, at least for now, before you see the material or see the product. That's called rational want, right? So eventually that rational want have to walk up the need space, and you have to make people really not only want that, but need that product. Okay? So core principle of discovering rational wants is through rationally telling the story of what value that we're trying to deliver. And one framework that we use a lot in my organization is called Kolb Experiential Model. This is kind of a learning model that was created in the 70s by human psychologists, last name Kolb. It's a very, very well-known theory, and it's still widely used in professional field. So let me kind of give you what that is. Since it's very difficult to see, I'll try my best. So let's try to dissect human thinking in two different dimensions. One dimension is one can be very analytic. What's the opposite to analytic? Being analytic, synthetic, right? And then you can be very, when you see an object, or when you see these data, these are a concrete piece of information, right? A cushion is X dimension. These are a concrete piece of information. And opposite to being concrete is being abstract. The lower left corner, being very analytic about concrete information that you saw, is called observation, so what you are seeing. So everything that you see with an analytical mind, concrete piece of evidence, that's called observation. Then what you do is like, wow, that's kind of great. What does that mean? You start putting your own interpretation to that observation. It's called framework, and that's what I mean insight. It has your own interpretation based on what you see. So it's a bit of a fiction based on your previous knowledge. With that insight, then what you want to do is you want to start synthesizing what you analytically put together, which is ideas. Now, in the world of idea, it's still abstract in your synthesizing. So idea doesn't have to be implementable. It's just an idea. It's a wild idea, right? And then when you're in that idea stage, then what you do is you want to bring that synthetical and abstract things down into more concrete solution, right? That's called solution. So walking this full circle, that's called the experiential model, and this is probably the most important tool we use when we do human study and create concept. Does that make sense to you? Is it too hard? It's not that hard, right? You guys are all U of M students, so it should be pretty easy to you guys. All right, so with that said, in real life, right, something that's concrete and that we need to do analysis, that's data requirements. And we give an interpretation, we explore different options, and then we make it real. So it's same thing, same idea, same principle, same regiment. So if you look at the vase thing, the known conditions, the data that you saw were 2 to 3 flowers, long stem, vase, flowers to last about a week. Those were more like explicit data. The implicit data that they didn't really tell you that you had to extract was something like it was a female buyer, a female user. She was a busy professional. She had home. And the reason why I put Henry was that she didn't really want like a very, very expensive solution. Okay? So those were untold, but it still was data. Now, what the artist did was instead of synthesizing what she saw, she took the more of the kind of implicit data, which tends to be more emotional, and then she went straight to the output without synthesizing, analyzing to the idea level and bring it down. The engineer did some of that, but not fully. Okay? So let me dive deep into the observation, which is the bottom left. So I hear this story many times, like, so how do you do good observation? Observation is highly socially contextual. How many of you in this room had an opportunity to live abroad or took like a year or a semester off and did study abroad? Okay. Any foreign students? Okay, that's good. So I think you guys will all appreciate this. So I'm going to give you an example of how observation works. And my example is from my experience. I had an opportunity to live in Korea for 2.5 years as part of my job. So from 2013 to 2015, I lived in Korea for 2.5 years. I've been living in this country for the past 30-something years. So to me, it was very refreshing. It was very fascinating. And I saw so many differences that's just stemming from cultural differences that if you don't pay attention, it'll just blow past by you. But it's actually a very, very, very rich piece of data that can spin into a very interesting insight. So here's the first one. So I'm going to probably cover 2 to 3 examples. Did you know that the address system in this country is very me-centric? So in other words, take a look at the one on the right. So that's you, okay? And then the way you describe the address system is I, Yoon Lee, who lives in this house. Hello, okay. That house is located in this street, which belongs to this city, and the city belongs to the state, and the state belongs to the United States, right? That's how we construct the address system. However, when I went to Korea, it was completely the opposite. A country called Korea, has a city called Seoul, which has a district called Gangnam, and in that location, in a certain apartment, there resides you. So it's completely not only backward, the emphasis is completely backward. It's not me-centric, it's more societal-centric, right? So if you just look at the address system only, there's a huge difference between the two countries, right? So for example, if you abstract that out into a user insight, in a country like Korea, it's much more absolute system. You know, you can be removed from the address system, but in an absolute system, that doesn't really mean a whole lot. Whereas in our country, it's a relative system. Everything evolves around you. So if you're removed, the entire kind of structure collapses, right? Because everything was centered around you, which belongs in this house, which belongs in this street. So when you're moved, that address doesn't really mean anything. In the absolute system, there is much more of a passenger mentality than a driver mentality. And then it's much of a concave approach rather than a convex approach. So those are the insights that I took just by observing the address system. Let me get into something like this. Left is the metric system. Right is the English unit, right? And you can kind of see similar stories here. Metric is an absolute system, right? You accumulate up to 10. Whereas English system is you have a full house, you chop it in half, you chop it in quarter, you chop that into an eighth and the 16th and the 32nd. So it's a division mentality, not an addition mentality. So that in itself would drive a whole set of new insights between two different countries, right? Another one. This is kind of interesting. These are the photos that I took. Left one is in Korea for the U-turn system. The right one is in Hollywood somewhere. In this country, you can turn left or even U-turn unless it says not to. In Korea, you cannot turn left or make a U-turn unless it says you can. You see the difference? So one system is a permission-based system. It's a top-down approach. They tell you what to do. Whereas the other system is more exception-based system, and it's more of a bottom-up system, right? You're free to do unless you're told otherwise. You're not guilty unless proven, right? This is a stock ticker. So on the left is from a Korean market. On the right is from the US market. This is so bizarre. It's so wild. When the stock price goes up, should it be green or red? Should be green. Right? In Korea, it's red. When the stock goes up, it turns red. In our country, it turns green. When the stock goes down, it turns green. It turns red here. So what does it tell you? Korea, it says, go buy it. It's cheap. Green, right? Here we say, shit, sell it. It's coming down, right? Can you see that difference? So one is a total buyer mentality. The other one is a total seller mentality. One is for getting attention for opportunity. The other one is warning for crisis, right? Another one. That's my apartment. That was my apartment in Korea. This is my home. I'm sorry, this is the other way around. This is the apartment in Korea. That's my home here in the United States. Do you see the difference? You see the difference? Look at the switch. In Korea, the switch is outside the room. In the US, it's inside the room. So in Korea, my daughter used to play like turning off the light when I'm in the bathroom. And I'm helpless. But like, if you ever visit Korea, and next time, take a look at this. It's all like that. I couldn't find a single example like this in the US. So what does this tell you? It's more like a discoveries or input-based priority on users. This is the US. It's actually, I mean, has to be reversed. And then in Korea, it's more priority on space-based, right? So do you kind of see the difference on why from data to insight is so important? So imagine, with that said, let me lead you into one example before I take your question. This candy, icebreaker, you guys all know this candy, right? It's made here. And what's really interesting is if you look at the top, it says to share, and on the bottom it says not to share, right? So one side has a very small opening and the other one has a huge opening, right? To share, not to share. How many of you think the left is to share? Okay. How many of you think the right is to share? Okay. Like I can already see like a lot of the hands that are going up are like either from foreign countries or not necessarily here. So here's the thing. It's actually to share is a small opening and not to share is the big opening. And the reason is because in the US when you share, you don't want other people's hand digging into your food, right? So you kind of do this. But in Korea, this is actually what's happening. You share like this, right? Everybody's, there's spoons like into one giant pot, and this is very common in Korea. So in Korean sense, share and not to share just doesn't make any sense. It should be more like this. If you want to sell in Korea, under the right context, it should be like that, right? It's as simple as that. But I've only created this to kind of illustrate how to design products correctly under the right data and the context. This applies to everything else that we create. It has to be relevant to the data, which is very, very contextual to the social needs. And then someone with the right understanding of the social needs has to give the right insights, which would then lead into a product that's relevant to our society. Okay, so these are some of the examples that we created. How much time do I have? Okay, so I will skip a lot of these except for maybe, let me see which one's the best one. Let's do this one. This is a very interesting product. It's called Matrix ID, and this was one of the best-selling multi-screen solutions in 2009. And you've seen a lot of multi-screen solutions, right? Like at bars, they have all these multi-screen solutions. Did you know that to put the multi-screen solution, the cost of the screen itself is about 20% of the total cost. 80% of the time, it's actually the labor and the structure that goes behind it. So once you set that up, you can't really change it in a very easy way, because when you take it down, then you have to spend that 80% of your cost to reconfigure. So that insight gave us, this is a B2B insight, because in the world of B2B, it's the total cost that matters. So what we did is we actually created each screen like a Lego block. So instead of have to have a brace in the back, now what you can do is you can simply click, 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 and put, different shapes and forms almost overnight. So if you're a shop owner, you can literally change your store look and feel overnight, and then we created a software solution so you can drop the content into the new shape, so your store would be different from say like yesterday. And this solution was particularly relevant to Southeast Asian market because the competition between the stores were very high, and they wanted to differentiate, and the public interest in looking for something new was very high. one of the solutions was, how can I make my store look different from day to day to day? And then, we came up with a solution, and it was one of the great successes. I have other examples, but due to time, I'm just going to cut it here. So, what the final message that I'd like to give to you is, understanding human insight and creating solutions for emotional benefit and unmet needs are as equally or sometimes even more important than pure technical solution for the success of design-centric products. So, we have a new definition of R&D, research and development, right? It's a human-centric research and development. So it has to marry both the rational want, which is the functional thing, the want from a more rational approach to the functional needs. So, research and development, right? One side is researching human inspiration and developing solutions to the unmet needs, right? On the technical side, yes, it's research of scientific facts and developing functional solutions. So I think this is the new definition of R&D, particularly in consumer-facing organizations. So we're kind of striving towards this structure. And in the past, when you say, I'm in R&D, and you kind of default think, oh, you're an engineer. But I think in the new kind of world, it doesn't have to be an engineer. R&D could be social science majors. It could be designers, not socialists. It could be It could be designers, or basically those who can extract out human story well. They're also part of our R&D system. I think this is about it. Thank you.
Yoon, thank you very much. We're bringing the house lights up because I know we've got some audience questions. I know the 417 students have prepared questions. Raise your hands when we find you. We've got about 5 minutes left. Hopefully we can get a couple questions in. Who's got a burning question here in our audience?
Hi, my name is Michael, and I was wondering, you mentioned that automobiles, you consider them to be the perfect intersection between design and emotion. Considering your opinion on that, why did you decide to move into consumer electronics?
I would love to go to automotive again. There's a number of different reasons. I think the most compelling reason, at least for me, was when I was with the automotive industry, and bear in mind this is like 20-something years ago. As a 25-year-old young engineer, I was too impatient to follow the slowness of automotive industry back then. So that's one of the reasons why I actually was looking for a more fast-paced area, and consumer electronic was, at the time and still was, the fastest area in terms of the industry advancement. So that's the primary reason. I do see, however, that automotive has caught up significantly with the new mobility paradigm and everything else. Particularly, automobiles are no longer just the pure mechanical elements. So it's kind of, the paradigm is changing, and the gap is kind of closing very rapidly.
My question is, at what point in your career did you realize or sort of understand the importance of human-centric design? And do you have any advice for college students who want to or college engineers specifically who want to focus more on human-centric design?
Yeah, so it was 1998, I believe. I think I jokingly said I drink oil. I consider myself as a born engineer, especially mechanical engineer. And I think I just wanted to create a product, particularly I wanted to be in the automotive industry. And that's actually one of the primary reasons why I went to U of M. When I was doing PhD, I went to business school, and I took a course in design thinking and kind of studying human behavior and creating products. And it gave me kind of an aha moment, engineering isn't really the only way to create products. There is someone who's actually shaking the rope at the end of at the end of the rope, which has a profound ripple effect at the very end, right? And I wanted to be the one who actually do this. And then engineering was somewhere in the middle, but I kind of quickly realized that I was much better fitted for this area based on some, coursework and stuff like that. Although I do want to stress that the engineering education that I got became the fundamental for thinking like that. So this may be a bit of a controversial statement in case there's a designer in here, but it's much difficult to coach principles and disciplines into more naturally obtainable skills, people with more naturally obtainable skills area like the designer. So in other words, it's hard to turn designers into innovators. It's a little bit easier to turn engineers into innovators because all we need to do is that unlock innate capability to understand human nature. Any other question?
So you got your undergraduate degree in mechanical engineering and your graduate degree?
Mechanical all the way. Go, Mechie.
Nahi, let's take one more from the top, please.
Hi.
Sorry, I'll get back to you.
Hi, I'm Phoebe. So I'm just wondering, do you have any suggestions?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I'm having trouble hearing you.
I'm just wondering, do you have any suggestions in discovering the human needs and also the emotional needs, unmet needs from the customers?
Yeah, if there is a course about storytelling, go take that course. Because storytelling is all about discovering observation and putting it into insight and taking it into ideas. So what I explained here is all about storytelling. So whoever offers storytelling in whichever department, I strongly encourage you take that course. If there is a kind of a design thinking course somewhere, go take that course. That's a very good fundamental starter. And I'm going to apologize. I think he had a question, but
Thank you.
we just kind of cut him off.
Oh, I thought he asked what your major was, and I was, okay, we're coming around with a microphone for you.
So now you're primarily involved in consumer electronics, and as far as I understand, you have more of a business role since you're vice president. Do you think your mechanical engineering education continues to help you today, or was it more of a stepping stone to help you get to where you are right now?
Obviously, I'm not using the core thermodynamics in my everyday, day-to-day work, all right? And obviously, I'm not applying my, mechanical engineering 210 course knowledge directly into, my day-to-day work because it went through evolution. But it was kind of critical, not because mechanical engineering is that much important than others, because it's more like solving problem, right? Solving problem, the ability to solve problem that I learned through my engineering education. That was huge. What I just saw you, that's solving problem, right? Go apply that to your engineering course. It works 100% time.
All right, thank you, 407. Thank you, Yoon C. Lee, for your time. Well done, well done. Don't forget your attendance quiz by 11:59. When you get to a laptop, fire it up. Let's think about the video you saw and perhaps a question about a vase or a vase. Thank you. Have a great weekend. Be safe.